Welcome to In the Box Seat. I'm Ray Fewings, and a big week coming up for South Australian greyhound racing this week. We've got the national distance final for the state and the national sprint. We had some good heats last week and should be another great meeting on Thursday. Our special guest on In the Box Seat tonight is Matt Corby, and he's the CEO, of course, of Greyhound Racing SA, and we've got some very vital questions to ask him, so stay with us on that. Now, racing nationally, there's nothing big except us this coming week. So we've got all the limelight on Angle Park on Thursday night for those big finals. Let's have a look at Thursday night. We've got the $7,000 state final of the Macro Meets National Sprint. We've got the $7,000 state final of the Macro Meets National Distance. And, of course, the Macro Meets National finals will be at Albion Park in Queensland on August 25. Now, the Honeys have got a few tips. For Wednesday, Event 3, number 4, Victor Troy. He's been going very well here at Angle Park, 30 and 32 winner recently, placed 7 out of 11 at this track and distance, and Wednesday program should be very hard to beat. They've also come up with race 9, number 4, Exit Clause, making his South Australian debut. He's won a couple of races from 9 over there in WA. His latest form is good, he's got pace, and expect a forward showing. Now the Honeys tips for Angle Park Thursday night, race 2, number 3, Keep Looking. Been thereabouts of late, and not a bad effort last start when first up over the 7:31 behind Margaret Bale. Coming back in distance and should be all the better for it. And the first 4 for that race 2, 3-6-2-8. Now the Honeys also say Event 3, number 2, Rhythm and Soul, ran home very well behind Podsy Ardley last week, although well beaten. And of course he showed good form during the Champion Puppy. And he'll get back to the winner's circle on Thursday night. The Honeys say race 3, 2-3-6-4. In the box seat tip, we're going to go with a tried and true Dark Duo to win the sprint. He looks as though he's back to his very best. And we're going to go for a dead heat. No, we won't. We'll go for Calden Mayhem to just hold off Satanic Cash in the state distance final by a nose. I'm working on the basis that if Calden Mayhem jumps and runs 29.7 for the first 500, and he'll be all the better for last week's run, I thought he might just hang on from Satanic Cash, but it'll be a beauty. Matt Corby, up next. Well, as promised, our special guest on In the Box Seat this week is Matt Corby, CEO of Greyhound Racing SA. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
It's a pleasure, Ray. Thanks for having me.
It's an ideal opportunity to catch up with some of the burning issues in greyhound racing, and a lot of people were a bit disturbed when you had track rationalisation at the head of affairs. Is there any good news for any of the clubs?
Yeah, well, it's been a challenging time, Ray. There's no doubt about that. We did have to start with getting that structure right, and we did say from the start that 7 tracks on our revenue model was never going to work in the longer term, but we've gone through that process now, and I can report that Port Augusta have not only submitted, but it's a very promising submission, and so hopefully we'll have an outcome on that pretty shortly that we can communicate to the public.
Yeah, that'll be a very popular one if you can bring that one through, Port Augusta, because it's virtually the only place up there with a track for all those owners, trainers and breeders, so I think that's a good move.
I think it's really important at the moment. The whole issue, Ray, is about getting that balance right between our tracks and facilities strategy, and also being able to afford that. I'm sure that their result, if they do get over the line with this, will only serve to strengthen the industry and obviously be a good result for participation. And that's what we're trying to balance, the cost and the participation, to try to get that model right.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. None of us, it doesn't hurt to reflect on what we can do better, does it? And I'm sure there'll be a better club for it, putting them on notice. Now, there is another issue. I read out occasionally here at the track that nominations have been extended. Now, I'm a bit worried that with all of these extra meetings, we might not in the future have enough greyhounds.
It's a concern. I think it's something we've got to get right very quickly, Ray. If you look ahead, we've got to putting Mount Gambier off to one side for a moment because it tends to operate as a satellite. We've got 6 weekly meetings on Sky Racing, and at the moment, based on our last year's breeding figures, we'd be lucky to sustain 3 or 4 of those in the longer term. Now, the simple fact is, if we can address that quickly, and I think that's something that, I don't think it is something that we are looking at as the highest priority, and seeing if we can somehow turn that trend around. If we can do that, then that opens up the opportunity to maintain our current scheduling and do that longer into the future. If we had another year like that, yes, we simply wouldn't have enough racing stock to be able to have a robust enough or populated enough industry to sustain that schedule.
So what's the plan? Are you going to make it cheaper, less red tape for breeders? Are you going to have more financial encouragement?
I think there are a number of layers to it, Ray. If you look at the fact that first of all we've probably got to attack the breeding issue. Breeding dropped substantially in the last 12 months, and we have to address that fairly quickly. And we're just about to come into the warmer months from September, October. So I think we need to work on that quickly. And I think it's a systemic approach after that to all the issues that go between whelping a litter through to racing, which includes breaking in facilities and pre-training and rearing, education that goes around that. I was just out at Taparoo looking at the straight run there today to see what we might be able to do. So to have those runs available, there are so many aspects to viable participation, and most of them are pretty simple, but you have to make sure that you're accommodating every step along the journey. And to some extent, I think there's certainly some improvement we can make in a number of those areas.
Would I be too harsh in suggesting that if Wheeler pulled the pin on South Australia that we'd buckle?
There are a couple of threats that would be bad days for us, and Paul Wheeler pulling out. At the moment, we estimate that Wheeler stocks account for about 18% of all our fields. At this point in time, supply is our highest priority, and so losing 18% would obviously do nothing to assist that. There are other things. There are other threats in the environment that we've got to overcome if we're going to be strong in the future. There are also some very positives for us. The Gawler meeting on a Friday is exceeding all expectations, and we do have a strong schedule, and we do have a geographic advantage in the longer term, being located on the shared borders with New South Wales and Victoria, if we can get these other structural issues right. So depending on what we do in the next 12 to 18 months, that'll dictate what happens in the 5 years to follow.
We certainly run it lean and mean, Greyhound Racing SA. I'm sure there's no fat anymore. You run a very good administration, and they're switched on professional people. How's the betting turnover holding up?
Yeah, the betting's been great. Really surprising, the last 3 weeks of July have all exceeded every week from the previous financial year, except for the week of the Nationals. That's great news. So there seems to be some buoyancy out there at the moment. Wagerings remain pretty strong, and as long as that's the case, and as long as we can fill those schedules, we're going to have a much better platform to address a lot of these issues, whether it be tracks and facilities or training facilities or support for breeders. We're going to be much better placed to do that. I just think it's the timing issue that's upon us that we need to address certain things, and breeding is probably at the top of the list. We probably need to find some way to assist breeders with the onerous costs that go with producing a litter in this day and age.
Now we don't dodge the hard ones. This wretched roadworks. What is that doing to McQueen's? Is McQueen's holding up, considering you've got to be a ferret to be able to get in?
It copped a bit of battering in the first 2 or 3 months. It wasn't good, to the extent that hospitality and gaming were both off as much as 25%.
Any compensation there?
No, unfortunately. It's part of our civic duty, I think, to be supportive of the development of roads, and so many businesses in this area will be affected by that. Simply, that's the way the cookie crumbles with it. But it's improved now. That the conditions you'd probably notice when you come into Angle Road are a lot more permanent now, whereas in the first 2 or 3 months it seemed to change in its structure every day. So certainly the figures have improved. We're expecting to be off by 10% for the year, but certainly better than those early figures of 20 plus.
It could have been absolutely disastrous. I think we've run out of time. We'll have to get you back again soon and see how these measures are shaping up. But thanks for joining us today.
That's a pleasure. Good on you, Ray.
Matt Corby, CEO of Greyhound Racing SA. And of course, for all of your Greyhound Racing information, make sure you regularly go on to grsa.com.au and especially look for your chaser's face in the crowd. It could win you dinner for two in the restaurant. Good punting at the Nationals this Thursday.